Hello everyone and welcome to another Cut Rate Commander Precon Upgrade Guide, the series where we take a look at Precon decks and bring them up to cut rate standards. My name is Grazzet and today we'll be looking at the Enduring Enchantments Precon from Commander Masters and its face commander, Anikthea Hand of Erebos, which, due to the increased price of the deck, will be bringing up from its roughly $85 price point to an increased budget of $135 after upgrades. But before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content and would like me to continue making more videos like this in the future. And if you're feeling particularly generous, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description to keep me caffeinated as I work on more of these builds, or instead use our newly acquired affiliate link with Game Nerds in the description below if you're looking to purchase sealed MTG product for Commander Masters or any of the other sets that they offer for some of the lowest prices around, all while helping out the channel as you do so. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see which Precon upgrade we'll be covering next. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Anikthea Hand of Erebos is a 4/4 enchantment creature demigod with menace that costs 2 and Abzan that has the following abilities. Firstly, she grants all other enchantment creatures we control menace, and secondly, whenever she ETBs or attacks, she exiles up to 1 target non-aura enchantment from our graveyard and creates a copy of it, except it's a 3/3 black zombie in addition to its other types. Breaking down her core stats, Anikthea is sporting a mid-size CMC, a slightly below average stat block for her cost, which is somewhat made up for by her built-in menace making her harder to block, and a pair of abilities that enable her to pseudo-reanimate our enchantments by turning them into creatures, while also making them and all our other enchantments creatures evasive as well. Taking a closer look at her second ability first, which is by far the more powerful of the two, it allows Anikthea to cheat out any enchantment from our bin into play by, essentially, turning them into 3/3 zombie enchantment creatures when she comes down and whenever she attacks, which allows us to generate a whole lot of value from our graveyard turn after turn, considering its only real limitation is being unable to reanimate auras, meaning any other enchantments, regardless of CMC, are fair game for her to bring back into play as tokens. And the fact that she brings those enchantments back as tokens instead of reanimating them traditionally shouldn't be taken for granted either. While admittedly, it does mean if the token is dealt with, it's gone forever, it does allow us to take advantage of token support cards, of which we have a decent number in our colors, to get extra mileage out of those tokens, but more on that later. This is then supplemented nicely by her first ability, which provides the token she creates and all other enchantment creatures we happen to be running with menace, allowing them to more reliably swing in for damage, which to be fair is pseudo-evasion at best, but, depending on how big we can make our board state, can be the difference between closing out a game and not. So, as we can see, Anikthea Hand of Erebos is clearly a commander that cares about enchantments and, to a smaller extent, creating tokens, aiming to reanimate enchantments from our bin as tokens with each passing turn to help us build up our board state. And, for the most part, the base build does a solid job at enabling that game plan, including various enchantments that are both powerful if cast normally or if reanimated by our commander, a handful of means to get them into our bin to be reanimated by our commander more easily, and a near-perfect selection of enchantment payoffs for us to take advantage of to generate additional value and board presence. That said, despite this deck being pretty solid out of the gate, this wouldn't be much of an upgrade guide if we didn't make some improvements, which in this build will be primarily to its enchantment lineup, where we'll be adding in some powerful entries that were omitted from the base build for us to hardcast and reanimate, additional enchantment support pieces for us to generate even more value off our enchantments throughout the course of the game, and even slotting in ways for us to multiply our tokens via populate to allow us to double up on their effects and reproc any cards that care about our enchantments entering the battlefield. Then with our remaining budget, we'll be making some quality of life changes to the build by refining its ramp package a bit with some more staple green land ramp sources to help improve its consistency, as well as improving its land base in order to speed it up and or make it more fetchable to enhance our consistency even further, thereby ensuring that our enchantresses will always have the mana necessary to overwhelm our opponents with their potent enchantments. So let us make our way to Theros and delve deep into its underworld, the domain without a ruler since Erebos' completion during the Phyrexian Invasion. It is here that we will find Anikthea, hard at work guiding the dead to their final resting places in her former master's domain, as death on Theros has not ceased despite Erebos' demise, and the banks of the Taurix River are overflowing with souls who lost their lives in defense of the plane. As such, her fallen master's duty falls to her, so she will wield the divinity that Erebos bestowed upon her to pass divine judgment on these otherwise lost souls so that they may rest, with only the souls of the dead and the screams of the trapped titans in now her domain to keep her company. So now that we have a better understanding of the commander and playstyle, let's take a look at the cards we'll be keeping from the base build. Starting with the creatures that we'll be holding on to from the core build, we'll begin by retaining the various enchantment payoff creatures included in the base build to help fuel our enchantment-heavy game plan. As such, to help pad our core stats, we'll be retaining Sithis Harvest's Hand, Satyr Enchanter, Verdurian Enchantress, and Mesa Enchantress as sources of repeatable card advantage as we cast our enchantments to ensure we can keep our hands nice and full, Cetessan Champion and Eidolon of Blossoms as even more card advantage that this time procs whenever an enchantment ETBs under our control, allowing them to work alongside our commander's reanimation and our other means that cheat enchantments into play for us for even more value, Herald of the Pantheon, Jukai Naturalist, and Starfield Mystic as means to reduce the cost of our enchantments to allow us to get our more expensive enchantments into play faster, or to cast our less expensive enchantments more frequently to proc our payoffs more often, Sanctum Weaver as a relatively cheap mana dork that scales with the number of enchantments we have in play, potentially allowing it to create huge pools of mana for us to cast even more spells in the mid to late game, Composer of Spring serving as an additional source of land drops as we cast our enchantments, and, eventually, once we have enough enchantments in play, as a way for us to cheat our creatures from hand into play instead to build up our board state even further, and Demon of Fate's Design as a way for us to cast our enchantments using our life instead of mana, allowing us to get even more of them into play faster, on top of being a gigantic evasive beatstick that can make itself bigger by having us sacrifice enchantments and enabling our commander's reanimation while doing so. We'll then also be holding on to Doomwake Giant, who in this build serves as a repeatable, one-sided non-destruction board wipe as we cast and reanimate our enchantments to help keep our opponent's boards clear of threats while we build up our own. Then switching gears from core stat improving enchantment payoffs to more utilitarian ones, we'll be hanging on to Destiny Spinner as a way for us to make our enchantments uncounterable, and then using them to turn our lands into gigantic beatsticks to help close out games. Ondu Spirit Dancer will be staying in as a means for us to get extra token copies of our enchantments as they come into play so we can double up on our most powerful effects and enable our tokens' matter payoffs. Archon of Sun's Grace will be keeping its spot as a repeatable evasive token generator in our enchantment-heavy build that can also gain us huge amounts of life back via the tokens it creates to help pad our life totals, and Nyxborn Behemoth will be retaining its spot as well as a gigantic trampling beatstick that we can get into play for as little as 2 mana thanks to our enchantments reducing its cost, which can also protect itself from most conventional removal while simultaneously giving our commander more reanimation targets by sacrificing enchantments. Then to wrap up our held over creature base, we'll be keeping both Nyx Weaver and Mindwrack Harpy as enchantment creatures that help get enchantments into the bin for our commander to reanimate via their mill, with the former also being able to get us back a card from the bin to hand to recur milled non-enchantments. Courser of Krufix keeps its spot as a draw source that reliably allows us to make our land drops by letting us play them off the top of our deck, which works nicely with our various repeatable draw sources to give it more opportunities to hit lands off the top, and the excellent reprint Dryad of the Elysian Grove maintains its spot as both a source of additional land drops to help speed up our mana base, and instant color fixing to improve the deck's consistency as soon as it comes down. Then moving on to our retained instance, we'll be holding on to the base build's lone inclusion in this category, Path to Exile, as a staple piece of non-destruction creature removal that's cheap enough to effectively deal with most creature-based threats, while leaving us with enough mana left over to continue casting our enchantments uninterrupted. It's then on to our carried over sorceries, which will mostly be consisting of the ramp sources Farseek, Rampant Growth, and Kodama's Reach, all of which provide the build with staple land-based ramp to help fix our colors and speed up our mana base, while also getting lands out of our deck to improve our chances of hitting our enchantments later. Then as our lone non-ramp spell in this category and our last sorcery holdover, we have Extinguish All Hope, which serves as a mostly one-sided board wipe in this build that lets us keep a good chunk of our creature base by sparing enchantment creatures, while destroying all other creatures to help us retake control of otherwise out-of-control board states. And then reaching the most important category of this build, our enchantment carryovers, we'll again be focusing on retaining the best enchantments the core build has to offer to ensure we get the most value out of them as we cast and reanimate them. So, starting off with enchantments that help us with our ramp, we'll be hanging on to Font of Fertility as a green-flavored Wayfarer's Bauble that helps fix our 3-color mana base with the land drop it provides, which we can later reanimate with Anikthea to be used again. Mirari's Wake retains its position as a mana doubler and AoE anthem that only gets better as we make copies of it to allow our lands to make even more mana, and to make our creatures, including itself when reanimated, even bigger. And the Saga Binding of the Old Gods also stays in as even more land ramp, this time that can fetch up non-basic forests, that also provides permanent destruction to help us deal with our opponent's threats, as well as AoE Death Touch with its final chapter, making our menace enchantment creatures even trickier for our opponents to block without 2-for-1ing themselves. Then staying on the removal game plan, Grasp of Fate and Cast Out will be staying in as exile-based removal options that can target any of our opponent's non-land permanents, with the former allowing us to eliminate each of our opponent's biggest threats, while the latter can be played at flash speed and can cycle itself into the bin for our commander to reanimate. The new Saga Battle at the Hell Vault holding on to its spot as even more, albeit temporary, exile-based permanent removal, which also doubles as a way for us to flicker and reproc our commander if we can safely attack in with her, while providing a gigantic evasive and resilient beatstick on its final chapter for us to continue to crack in with. And Ghoulish Impetus will be staying in as well as pseudo-removal thanks to its combination of inflicting goad and granting death touch to our opponent's creatures, usually allowing us to eliminate 2 of our opponent's creatures if it's blocked, only for it to come right back into play to be used again and reprocking all our ETB enchantment payoffs when it does so for even more value. Then to round out our core stat improving enchantments, we'll be keeping Enchantress's presence as another powerful source of archetypal draw as we cast our enchantments to generate us even more value, as well as Cacophony Unleashed, which serves as another one-sided board wipe in this build as we cast it, and leaves behind an easy-to-proc 6/6 body with Menace and Death Touch for us to swing in with for even more damage, or, at worst, resulting in 2-for-1 removal if it's double blocked. Then moving on to some more token-focused enchantments, Sigil of the Empty Throne will keep its spot as a fantastic enchantment payoff that creates decent-sized evasive bodies for every enchantment we cast. Felidar Retreat hangs on to its position as a source of tokens early and a way for us to power up our entire board via AoE +1/+1 counter distribution later. And Sandworm Convergence stays in as a passive source of sizable token bodies that also doubles as a way for us to lock out our opponents from attacking us with flyers for additional protection. Then to support our token creation, we'll be retaining the Saga Battle for Bredegard as a way for us to duplicate all our unique tokens, effectively serving as an AoE pseudo-populate effect to double up on all the tokens that Anikthea and our other sources create to get even more value out of them. And then as our final 2 enchantment carryovers, the new Boon of the Spirit Realm will of course be staying in as a powerful anthem that keeps growing more and more potent with every enchantment that ETBs under our control to make our board even deadlier, as will the fantastic reprint Starfield of Nyx, which provides the build with even more enchantment reanimation to work alongside our commander, and eventually turns all our enchantments into creatures for us to swing in with and pile on the damage. It's then on to our retained artifacts, in which the only 2 included in the base build, Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, will be staying in our build as well thanks to being excellent mana rocks that help speed up and or fix our mana base to ensure we can get to our higher CMC enchantments and commander quickly and reliably. Similarly, the core build's only included Planeswalker, Calyx Destiny's Hand, will also be staying in, as he provides repeatable enchantment-themed draw, turns all our enchantments into pseudo-oblivion rings to use as removal, and possesses a powerful ultimate that's capable of reanimating all our enchantments from the bin if the opportunity presents itself, which admittedly isn't often but is nice to have access to just in case. And finally, reaching our retained land base, we'll be holding on to the Mana Lands Command Tower and Sandsteep Citadel, both of which tap for any of our colors to improve consistency, Exotic Orchard, which should be able to tap for most of, if not all our colors off our opponent's lands, The reveal lands Fortified Village, Necroblossom Snarl, and Shine Shadow Snarl, as well as the battle land Canopy Vista, all of which can tap for one of two of our colors and generally come into play untapped thanks to our basics to provide decent fixing without sacrificing speed. The Tainted lands Tainted Field and Tainted Wood, both of which provide more easy to proc untapped fixing thanks to our ramp sources being easily able to get swamps into play for us. And the filter land Sungrass Prairie as one last way for us to fix for our two most common colors without coming into play tapped to do so. And then as our last retained non-basic land, we'll be holding on to Krosan Verge as a source of ramp that, while slow, can be used to fetch up the non-basic lands included in the base build and the ones that we'll be adding in our upgrades to give us one last boost to the mana base's consistency while thinning out our deck in the process. And lastly, we'll be keeping the 6 plains, 4 swamps, and 8 forests included in the base build as our basics to round out our mana base. That leaves us with a final tally of 75 cards, including basic lands that we'll be keeping from the base build, leaving us with 25 cards to replace, giving us a very solid foundation for us to build our enchantment-themed deck around while still having enough room for us to improve upon it. So, now that we've covered all the cards that made the cut from the core build, let's move on to our upgrades. Beginning with our creature upgrades, we'll start off by swapping in some additional enchantment payoffs to further supplement the deck's primary game plan. Starting with Narcy Fablesinger being cut, who is admittedly a fantastic commander for a saga-themed enchantment build, but lacks the critical mass of them here to be very effective in this build, in favor of Calyx Guided by Fate, who's much better suited for this enchantment build as a means to get additional token copies of our enchantments into play as he gets in for damage, in addition to being able to continually load himself up with counters as our enchantment CTB, which, when combined with our commander's menace granting, makes blocking him properly that much more difficult. We'll then proceed to swap out the Theros gods Erebos Bleak-Hearted and Heliod God of the Sun, both of whom are okay enchantment creatures but are a bit too expensive and don't really contribute to the enchantment game plan, so we can swap in the enchantment payoffs Grim Guardian and Weaver of Harmony, the former tacking on decent AoE life loss to every enchantment we have enter the battlefield, and being a fantastic enchantment to turn into a token and make multiple copies of to be able to drain out the table even faster, while the latter serves as a solid tribal lord that also allows us to cheaply double up on our best enchantment abilities to get even more value out of them. And then wrapping up our new creature additions, we'll be sidelining Spirit Companion and a cantrip it provides in favor of Shigeki Jukai Visionary, whose ability to ramp us, mill us, bounce himself back to hand to be recast, and returning any cards from our graveyard back to hand are invaluable to nearly every aspect that this deck needs to cover, as well as axing the bit too unreliable token generator Arasta of the Endless Web for the non-enchantment creature Nesting Dovehawk, who still manages to find a home in this build thanks to being a fantastic source of passive populate each turn to get us more copies of our enchantment tokens into play, while also making its evasive body bigger each turn with each token we create so we can get in with it for decent damage on top of that. Then skipping over our instance, since we won't be adding any new entries to that category, we reach our sorcery upgrades, where we'll be swapping out the last 2 creatures in the main build, the lackluster land drawing Nissian Wanderer and the unimpressive ramp source Greater Tanuki, so we can swap in a Nature's Lore and a Cultivate, both of which provide the build with much more reliable and efficient land ramp to help us fix and speed up our mana base more effectively. It's then on to our enchantment upgrades, the category where we'll be making the most changes to ensure we have the best enchantments available to enable our Enchantress themed build. Starting off with some new enchantment entries that will help improve our core stats even further, we'll be cutting the repeatable card selection Abundance provides in favor of Elemental Bond, which provides us with repeatable card advantage instead as our commander reanimates our enchantments as 3/3s, and the majority of our creature base comes into play after being empowered by our anthems, axing the somewhat underwhelming Saga Love Song of Night and Day for the more powerful Aura Shards, which this time provides the build with repeatable back row removal whenever a creature ETBs under our control so we can pick apart our opponent's artifacts and enchantments, and the core build's remaining sagas, the Mending of Dominaria, the Binding of the Titans, and the Eldest Reborn, all being sidelined in favor of the additional removal pieces Seal of Cleansing, Seal of Primordium, and Aura of Silence. giving the build even more means to disrupt our opponent's back row, which in turn send them to the graveyard to be reanimated by our commander to be used again, with the last one even passively increasing the cost of our opponent's non-creature spells when it's in play, making it ideal to make copies of to crank up the price of their spells even higher. Then moving on to enchantments that help improve the token aspect of our build, the decent board wipe culling ritual will be removed in favor of the more on-theme hallowed haunting, which creates ever-growing tokens as we cast our enchantments and then grants all our creatures vigilance and flying once we reach a critical mass of enchantments to improve both our offense and defense, while the mediocre omens, Omen of the Sun and Omen of the Hunt, will both be losing their spots to Song of the World Soul and Growing Ranks, whose repeatable populate is fantastic in this build to get extra copies of our reanimated enchantments into play, and our exceptional reanimation targets themselves for our commander to allow us to populate them and our other tokens even more. And then to round out our enchantment upgrades with some additional support pieces for our game plan and commander, we'll be slotting out Dreadhorde Invasion's token creation to slot in Sterling Grove, which provides all our other enchantments with targeted removal protection via Shroud, while also being a cheap enchantment tutor to bring up our most powerful enchantments right to our hand. Kalani Heart Expedition Slow Ramp losing its spot to Privileged Position, which this time provides all our other permanents with targeting protection via Hexproof to make dealing with them even more difficult outside of wiping the board. The part Pillow Fort, part Pseudo Card Advantage piece Cunning Rhetoric being axed to make room for Cemetery Tampering, whose continual mill enables our commander with enchantments to reanimate while slowly building up to a free spell via its hideaway, and the lackluster Cycling Land Ash Barrens being raised to put Teleportation Circle in its place, whose flicker effect is a great way for us to get extra uses out of our commander's ETB enchantment reanimation, or enable her to use it on otherwise stalled board states to still build up our board without having to swing in. And at last, reaching our land upgrades, we'll be swapping out the Bounce Lands Golgari Rot Farm, Orzhov Basilica, and Selesnya Sanctuary for their Painland equivalents, Llanowar Wastes, Caves of Koilos, and Brushland to help improve our mana base's speed without sacrificing consistency, and then terraforming the Scrylands, Temple of Plenty, Temple of Malady, and Temple of Silence into Murmuring Bosk, Haunted Mire, and Radiant Grove, which may still be tap lands, but whose basic land types makes them fetchable by our non-basic land ramp sources to make our ramp package even more consistent. So, now that we've covered all 25 cards that we've upgraded from the core build, let's take a look at the breakdown for this Precon upgrade. This deck currently has 27 creatures including our commander, 1 instant, 6 sorceries, 27 enchantments, 2 artifacts, 1 planeswalker, and 36 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have a total of 44 cards that are considered enchantments, 30 cards that care about enchantments, 6 cards that set up our graveyard via either mill or sacrificing themselves or other enchantments, 3 sources of enchantment reanimation, 9 sources of token generation, and 3 cards that care about tokens, giving us a pretty solid Enchantress build with plenty of enchantments and payoffs for them to fuel the primary game plan, a good number of ways for us to enable and support our commander via graveyard support and additional enchantment reanimation, and a decent token sub-theme to help build up our board state alongside our commander while getting even more copies of the tokens she creates into play for us as well. Then for general deck stats, we have 19 ramp sources, 10 card draw sources, 11 targeted removal sources, and 3 board wipes, with only our ramp being much higher than average due to the base build's large number of enchantment cost reduction sources, which are still very useful to us, especially in the mid to late game when our enchantresses are drawing us more cards than we know what to do with. Looking at our mana curve, we have 3 1-drops, 16 2-drops, 19 3-drops, 11 4-drops, 8 5-drops, 4 6-drops, 1 7-drop, 1 8-drop, and 1 12-drop, leaving us with a lower mid-weight curve that aims to get out as many of our enchantment payoffs into play as possible in the early game, followed by our enchantments to begin generating value and building up board presence. Then from there, once we get enchantments into the bin via mill, sacrifice, or them just being destroyed by our opponents, We'll bring out our commander to begin reanimating them and then continue to build up our board presence with more and more tokens via her effect, as well as our other token generators and our populate sources, until our opponents are either crushed under our superior number of enchantment creatures, or fall before the effects that the multiple copies of our enchantment tokens provide. The final price of this build then comes out to be $135.47 after upgrades. This price does not include tax or shipping and assumes that the price you paid for the Precon was $85. The price of the cards was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. Taking a look at some potential side grades, we can trade out Nesting Dovehawk for Gravebreaker Lamia if we'd rather have an additional way to set up our graveyard and proc our payoffs over being able to copy the tokens our commander creates, and Privileged Position can be exchanged out for Sphere of Safety if we value preventing our opponents from attacking into us over keeping our permanents from being destroyed by their removal. Then for further upgrades, Cultivate can be cut in favor of Smothering Tithe as a more on-theme source of ramp to generate us huge swaths of mana in the form of treasures to help cast our spells as our opponents draw cards. Courser of Krufix can be traded out for Argothian Enchantress as yet another Enchantress effect to generate card advantage for us as we cast our enchantments, this time with built-in targeted removal protection to keep itself alive, and Cast Out and Felidar Retreat can be slotted out so we can slot in Anointed Procession and Parallel Lives, which get us even more mileage out of Anikthea's token creation by doubling the amount of tokens she and all our other sources create for us, which is appropriate considering that these and all the other upgrades I just mentioned more or less double the price of our deck. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. With the Enduring Enchantments Precon upgrade complete, the next and final deck we'll be covering will be the Eldrazi Unbound Precon and its face commander, Zuladok Voidgorger. So look forward to a big mana colorless theme build featuring them coming soon. And lastly, before we close out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel can't continue to grow without your support. And if you're feeling particularly generous, feel free to keep me caffeinated via buying me a coffee at the link in the description, or alternatively, use our Game Nerds affiliate link in the description if you're looking to purchase sealed MTG product, accessories, board games, or any of their other wide selection of products at low prices that include free shipping for orders over $75, and a rewards program that builds up store credit over time as you make your purchases. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the Cut Rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.